Last week, I took about 15 years off of my LinkedIn profile experience and ended up getting 2 recruiter reach outs within the week, which is more than I've had in the entire year previously with hundreds of applications. It was mind-blowing, but it shouldn't be, especially to me. I've spent 20 years inside these systems, and I can tell you that this is a majority. Yet every company will tell you that the layoffs were not based by age, and every ATS vendor is going to tell you that their algorithm is neutral. But today I'm going to show you exactly how those filters work, and we're going to talk about a federal court case, some government data, and how my own personal little A/B test is all pointing to the same conclusion, which is essentially if you're over 40 and an experienced worker, the system is not struggling to find you. It's probably designed to avoid you. But let's start with the numbers because data doesn't have an opinion. In 2024, 16,223 age discrimination complaints were filed with the EEOC, which was up pretty significantly from 2023. It was about 14,000 complaints filed then. 2022, I think there were 11,500. That's right. But other data sources tell us that this is just the tip of the iceberg because AARP ran a survey and they found that 2/3 of workers over 50 experienced or witnessed age discrimination in the workplace. And 74% of older workers believe that their age will be considered a barrier for hiring. I believe that. And then Glassdoor reported a 113% increase in ageism comments on their platform. This includes employees within the companies, but also applicants and people who were interviewed by employees of those companies. Things are getting worse. And it's not just happening inside companies. It's actually happening before anyone ever sees your resume. And I think the part that most people need to understand is that by the time a recruiter actually looks at your resume, that resume pool has already disintegrated. And it's being done by software. 98.4% of Fortune 500 companies use an applicant tracking system, scoring their resumes by an algorithm before anyone ever sees them with human eyes. And those systems have a very structural problem with tenure. Some of those ATS systems prioritize how recent your experience is, whether your keywords present themselves in jobs that you held years ago. And older candidates are going to have keywords that present very far back in their resumes. Younger candidates are going to have very short, more recent experience. So their keywords are going to be all bunched up in a very short period of time. So your 20 years of doing the thing will be scored lower than someone who's only been doing it for 3 years. But it gets more specific than that. Legal experts have noticed that if an employer screens for a college degree or specialty that didn't exist 20 years ago, so think data science, machine learning, even UX design majors, there's an unintentional impact that could be screening out older workers just by requiring those degrees. But the discrimination doesn't have to be intentional to be illegal. Under the ADEA, disparate impact is enough. And I found out that LinkedIn's internal data shows that recruiters contact people who are over 55 60% less than they do younger candidates, who, by the way, have the same degree of experience or better. But I'm going to tell you where it stops being theoretical. In 2022, the EEOC filed a lawsuit against a company called iTutor. They're a Chinese company that employs American workers to tutor people on English skills. Much of their work is done remotely. And according to the EEOC, iTutor programmed its software to just automatically reject females who were over 55 and males who were over 60. And it ended up rejecting over 200 candidates just because of their age. But I think that gender asymmetry is very important here. First of all, women got cut off 5 years earlier than men. What? And it wasn't accidental. Like someone very intentionally designed a code to do this thing, discriminate. And then they ran that code silently, invisibly on thousands of applications. But they did get discovered. An applicant submitted 2 different versions of their resume. One was the entirety of their career in chronological order, and it included their real birth date. The other application cut off chronology a little bit earlier, like 15 years, and they included a much later birth date, more recent, if you will. So the federal court approved a consent decree in September of 2023. And under the terms of the settlement, iTutor Group agreed to pay those 200 applicants $365,000. They adopted some anti-discrimination policies, took some conduct training, committed to ensuring compliance across their hiring practices. And when the EEOC announced this settlement, their chair said something that I think everyone should pay very close attention to. Other companies need to hear this. Age discrimination is unjust and unlawful, even when technology automates that discrimination. And the employer is ultimately responsible. Anyway, when I decided to run this little experiment of my own, and I have 20 years of people analytics, HR, talent experience. I don't know why. I didn't expect that I was going to get the results that I did, but immediately 2 recruiters reached out to me. And I don't have an open for work badge. I'm not really looking for a job right now. I was legitimately shocked. And I'm not saying you should permanently falsify your work experience. That's not the point. The point is what this reveals about the companies that are doing the hiring and the technology that they're using. My resume didn't change. My experience didn't change. What changed was how much of my timeline was visible, which is a real filtering problem. And if you're over 40, you have very specific legal protections. And those protections cover hiring, firing, job assignments, promotions, layoffs, training, benefits, probably much more. But what a lot of people don't know is under the ADEA, discrimination does not have to be intentional to be unlawful. For discrimination that's based on disparate impact, the intent to discriminate is not required. And an unintentional discriminatory policy can land an employer in just as much trouble as an intentional discrimination act. And if a company's ATS is intentionally screening out candidates who are over 40, if that's just because that's how the algorithm weighs recency, that's a potential ADEA violation. And the regulatory landscape is shifting. New York City now requires audits for all automated hiring systems. The Workday lawsuit, which is a separate case, alleges that Workday's algorithmic screening process discriminates against older workers and people with disabilities. And the regulatory response, it's real, but it trails adoption by years, which leaves us candidates to navigate this current reality rather than waiting for the ideal one. So while the law catches up, you need to know how to work with the system that already exists. And if you suspect that you're being filtered by age, and the data suggests that many of you are, you can test it in a way that's methodically clean. You're going to start by building a control resume. It's going to be the baseline, all of the details, all of the years, all of the experience into one. Apply to some roles. I'm going to suggest about 10 just to give you some valid data. And then you're going to build a test resume. You're just going to trim that visible timeline to the last 10 or 12 years of experience. Don't remove any of your skills or accomplishments. Keep all of your credentials. Just remove the years if you have them on there. And I'm going to be really clear. You're not lying. You are removing what's visible. The years are not important in these cases. And then you're going to take that resume and go apply to a few comparable roles. Another 10 or 20 or whatever you did with the first resume. Unless you change your email and phone number, you're probably going to flag an ATS error. So don't go apply to the same jobs with the same email and phone number. You'll want to maybe apply to comparable jobs at similar companies. But you're going to have to track everything. Log all of your applications, all of the dates, which application you used. You know the drill. And then you should look at that gap and really understand the difference between the two versions, especially as it relates to callbacks, interviews, any kind of outcome that either of those resumes has. It doesn't necessarily prove illegal discrimination in the legal sense, because you're going to need a lot of volume and documentation to do that, and probably an attorney. But it's going to tell you what the system is signaling. And if you believe that you have been systemically discriminated against for any reason, there is a link in my Linktree bio for that EEOC complaint. You can file online. It costs nothing. And because AARP tells us that only 3% of people who experience this ever file a complaint, every complaint that gets filed moves the needle in the right direction. In conclusion, a company coded age discrimination into their hiring algorithm, and it took someone running an experiment with 2 different resumes to prove it. There was a court case, a $365,000 settlement, and a 5-year injunction later. But this practice is still widespread, and older workers are constantly being discriminated and filtered out before humans ever see them. I just ran this experiment to find out whether I was imagining it, and I don't know if I liked it better when I thought I was just imagining it or not, but maybe you'll get a little bit of peace from just knowing that you're not alone. Anyway, if this landed for you, share it with someone who's in their 40s or 50s or 60s and wondering why the market feels so different, because it's not them and it's probably not you either. Follow along if you want to keep hearing more about this good news. There's a lot more of it where it came from.